Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, Nika. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. How's your morning going so far?
Uh, good, pretty productive. I I believe it's pretty early for you, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know. I do a lot of interviews, and usually I kind of depend on the PRs to do the like the time thing for me because I somehow sometimes get it backwards. And Idaho has two different time zones. And so I think Annie thought I was in northern Idaho. And so I was like an hour ago up and ready, had the camera going, and I was like, oh, he's late, no big deal. And then I thought, wait a minute, that said Eastern time. That's only 2 hour difference. And so yeah, I've been raring to go for over an
Okay.
hour now.
Wow.
On my second
Oh,
cup of coffee.
yeah, I was gonna say sorry you woke up early.
Oh no, I get up early anyway. No big deal. It just
Oh,
means I
well,
get to be more productive in my day.
there you go. That's a good way to spin it.
Sure, for sure. I was actually out really late last night at a show too, and so I was like, all right, I can do this off of little sleep, but
That's hilarious. Well, I mean, I mean, this industry has always been like, yeah, what is sleep? Uh, I'm
I
either
bet.
up late or I'm up early doing other things. So yeah, yeah.
Well,
That,
yeah. Oh, sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I was gonna say that mixed in with I'm also an educator, so I teach at like three universities right now, and it's just like
Oh
constant
my
rotation.
gosh.
Oh yeah.
Do you do face to face with them?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So
Oh
you
yeah.
have three universities, I hope, somewhat close by.
Well, that's the good thing about New York City. Everything is pretty accessible with especially like public transportation. It's really good here in the city.
Yeah.
But everything in like Manhattan to like its surrounding areas, they're usually, I would say, 30 minutes apart, in terms of
Oh,
travel
okay.
time. So
Okay.
it's not too bad. But once I run out the door, I have to make sure I don't miss a train.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, have you ever watched this? Did you watch the show Friends or did you watch the show Friends?
Oh yeah, a long time ago.
Do you remember the episode where Ross was the professor and had to like had one class on one side of the campus and one side on the other side of the campus, and so he was like rollerblading or roller skating or
Oh
something.
my gosh. Yeah, my sister was so into Friends, so I always caught on with her watching this kind of stuff. And yeah, I do remember that episode, and I guess it feels kind of like that.
Yeah,
Except I don't have rollerblades. I just have my
right.
normal feet and I just have to run.
Needs to chest, needs to chest.
There you
Um,
go.
are you teaching philosophy then?
I'm teaching audio technology.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So was that like doing sound at shows?
Yes, it's a mixture of pretty much sound at shows, studio work,
Oh, right.
broadcast. It's a lot of, all different ranges, post-production. It's a huge world, and I've been teaching since 2019.
Okay,
And
cool.
before then, I mean, working in the industry for a long time. At this point, it's about 15 years.
Jeez.
So yeah, it's been a good run so far. I've worked everything from Good Morning America to working at like festivals, like Newport Folk Festival. I've worked in I think Global Citizens Fest. I've done quite a bit of Barclays, Barclays Center
Wow.
in New York City.
Okay.
It's been a good time, and I've been on tour and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of experience in my realm to sort of pass on to students.
Yeah.
And something that I, of course, really specialized in was in my artistry. I've always been an artist, and so being able to show students how to not only learn to create their art at a high quality industry standard, but to also learn how to market that to be able to become, some sort of their own household name, or at least learn the path towards that is something I'm really passionate about. Actually, it's funny that we're talking about education right now because my company is called Metal Mastermind. It's an entire uh, education resource designed for metal musicians. So
Oh, wow.
that's what we do.
That's really cool. That's something my son's interested in getting into. He's a guitar player and he knows how difficult it is to make it as a musician. And so he's like, I want to do something with music. And that's what he's been looking into doing.
Cool. Well, he could certainly check out Metal Mastermind. We have about 3,000 students.
Wow.
And I actually just got off the phone with, I don't know if you know Muncie Ritchie. He's radio promo called Skateboard Marketing. He does a lot of the, reach outreach to all the radio stations for metal
Okay.
music in the
Oh,
US.
oh wow. Okay.
And so, I'm building content for my students all the time, and this is just one of those examples where bringing in industry people to talk about what is it like on the other side, where I don't know what radio does, so this is
Yeah.
what it looks like, right? So, really good resource for people for them to just kind of learn how the industry works as a whole, to then find out where to take the next step for themselves.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'll definitely have him look into it because that seems to be, he's a junior in high school right now, and that seems to be his direction.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, well, let me know.
I will. I will for sure. So yeah, let's get into the album. It's been out since September. How has the response been on your side? I assume you look it, you put a lot of time and effort into this. It
Yeah. Yeah, it's been really well received. Um it's different. A lot of the comments that I get with Homeric is that it has a definitive sound of its own. It also tends to appeal to people who are not just metalheads,
yeah,
which is very interesting. Because it has its metal at heart, but
for sure.
it's very worldly. And I think a big part of that was me experimenting with my sound in college, where I was learning how to do my recording technique, but I was also really interested in other types of music. And here in New York, we're surrounded by all these different types of cultures.
Hmm.
So I would have, friends of mine who knew how to play flamenco, or they knew how to play Celtic music, or they had Eastern Asian influences or African influences. And we would just kind of come together, and I'd say, hey, I was kind of thinking of this. I love film scores too as a hobby to listen to. So
Hmm.
I'm always kind of thinking in the ways of creating like a film score, and incorporating all these different types of genres kind of helped create a melting pot for Homeric. So a lot of people, when they approach it, they're like, wow, this is like metal, but it's like digestible metal in a way for some folks that
Mm.
would have not normally listened to metal.
Oh,
And
okay.
I think the cinematic appeal helps with that, in making it a little bit more exciting and different for folks. So it's been well received so far. One guy called it a cultural artifact, so I was like, okay, that's
Oh, that's
awesome.
cool. I mean, that's a big compliment.
Yeah, I was very humbled by it.
Yeah, artifacts don't just go away. That's cool. Well, yeah, I'm actually going to a Broadway play tonight, and I thought it to me it's like watching a Broadway play in
Yep.
or listening to a Broadway play, and because it's very theatrical. There's so
Hmm.
many different things going on. You got um different vocals, you got a choir, you got the harsh
Yes.
vocals, you got a narrator, plus the music on top of that that has so many layers to that as well. And so it's just a whole adventure. It's funny, I actually have Dante's The Inferno. I've had the book forever, but I've never read it. And I was like, now I really want to read it because it's such an interesting story. And I only knew like glimpse of what the story was supposed to be about. I guess
Yeah.
because it's in poems, I was like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna how well I'm gonna be able to digest, but now I'm really stoked
Well,
about
that's really funny that you mentioned that too, because I mean, Dante Alighieri, I mean, it's medieval poetry. It's very, very old, language.
it. Hmm.
And when Dante made his poem, it was one of the biggest impacts on, I think, human society in general, because what he was doing was taking something that was normally considered content that was distributed by the church and making it actually accessible to the public in their own language, right?
Yeah.
And so when you read Dante's Inferno, it's hard to read because it's a lot of this allegorical context, and Dante's like obsessed with the number three. So he just makes things like sound a little weird because he wants it to be like either in a rhythm of three or something related to the number. And even in stanzas or anything like that. So approaching Dante's Inferno requires a little bit sometimes of an academic understanding of what he was trying to talk about. And even when you read some of the translations, they're a little bit like, that's a little weird. So I don't blame you, because I think for a lot of people it felt that way. And it wasn't until like I actually talked to a student of mine who is Italian, who grew up in Italy, and that's part of their culture. He was just like, yeah, Inferno. We that's
Old
that's
news.
that's like Catcher of the Rye
Oh,
in the US, but for Italy, they always talk
dang.
about the Inferno. And there's like, it's so old, we know.
Okay, I
And
didn't know that. That's so interesting.
it's so interesting. And it with the Circle of Dead Children, I feel like it's a fun way to approach Dante, because it's, well, one, it's much more modern, so we can definitely understand it in our context, but
For
it's
sure.
also a little more relatable because the whole entire premise of the story takes place during World War II, which is a not so distant history.
Hmm.
That there are definitely certain relevances that we see even today. I mean, take a look at what the election was going on right now. People are calling it, still using context from World War II in
Absolutely.
today's
Yeah.
election. So
Right.
it's so interesting. And I find it to be that when we're talking about the Inferno and you're seeing it through a different lens, like this original adaptation is doing, it feels like a new story. But it does pay homage to those who know about the Inferno, and it's like, oh, okay, that's a detail that I appreciate, which is actually in certain things like the titles of the songs. You'll notice that it says cantos,
Hmm.
and those are actually from the original poem. So if you're reading the poem, you'll know that those songs are supposed to illustrate that, but
Okay.
the songs themselves, of course, tell my story. But
Hmm.
that's just my way of paying homage to what would have been from the original.
That's super cool. What made you decide this was the direction you wanted to go? This was because there's a million stories out there, especially with philosophy. What made you decide on this one almost
Uh,
10 years ago?
yeah. Well, when I started Homeric in general, um, I had been, like I was mentioning before, experimenting a lot with my own sound, and I didn't quite know exactly what it would be. So at the time, I was really just exploring a lot of different avenues of just topics, and I had been taking a summer class, and it was a world humanities class that really sort of
Mm,
exposed this to me. And what
mhm.
was interesting about that professor, his name was Matt Matthews. He was yeah, I know, right? He was actually such a really interesting dude because he approached a lot of literature as mythology, including the Bible. So I'm here at New York City College. We're pretty secularist to begin with, very academic, and
Yeah,
here we are reading the Bible. This is not a theologian school. And we were looking at it as if it was just a story. And I was like, actually, that's kind of neat. I like that approach, because you can learn something from it and not have to feel like, oh, I have to debate, the validity of this information.
right.
So it actually made it feel much more approachable.
Mhm.
And when I got to the Inferno in that class, because we were also doing the Odyssey,
Oh, failure.
Candide, there are a lot of these other philosophical stories that we were looking at, and the Inferno was one of them. And we were really digesting it word by word throughout the entire thing. And we spent like 3 weeks just only on the Inferno. I had so much fun. It was the most fun I've had about a context that was so old. And
Mhm.
I'm actually a bit of a history buff. I would choose taking medieval history over, other things. So I did that in college, and it was kind of around the same time that I was learning about the Inferno and learning about the plague and all this kind of stuff and what was happening in the world at the time when this happened. And oddly enough, we actually had our own plague, and
Right,
here's another inferno coming out of that. So, uh,
right.
but the presence of Homeric itself as a unit, as a band or a project, it came from that class of learning from Homer. I mean, Homeric meaning as in the style of the poet Homer, and other ways of looking at it are to be super epic or, very grandiose kind of works. And I wanted to create a story because I've always been creating stories. I was really into The Legend of Zelda when I was a child, and I would create a lot of fan fictions when I was a kid.
Oh, that's cool.
So that kind of, propelled me into this as well. And I sort of, if you want to call it a fan fiction, it is my own adaptation, but it's
Yeah,
very much like through the eyes of someone who appreciated the original works. And I called the entire project Homeric because I wanted to make an epic. I wanted to make something that was not just the Inferno, but it also carried into the entire Divine Comedy. It's going to be in Purgatory, Paradise, and we're going to explore the Apocalypse as well.
that's awesome. I know this obviously just came out and there's a lot, again, a lot of time and work and effort that went into it. But do you have any idea what the next like do you have some ideas of what you want to tackle next?
Well, the next thing is immediately the audiobook.
Oh,
So,
fun. Oh, that's
yes.
cool.
So there is an entire novel that goes with this album,
Oh,
right? And the novel just came out on Halloween. So we are now in the next phase, which is we're developing the audiobook, which is going to be an immersive Dolby Atmos. And
that's
you're going to hear all the demons and,
wow.
environments of hell surround you as you go deeper into the inferno, and the story will unfold. So that's going to be the big project that leads into 2025.
Okay.
And while that's happening, we are already writing Purgatory. We have an entire outline for the rest of the entire Divine Comedy. And so those are being held in action. I do have some other music that is actually a little ahead of schedule with heaven. So I'm exploring what the sounds of heaven look like, and we're sort of mixing and matching things at this point.
That's so cool. Do you have the same people working with you throughout all of these other ones then?
Oh, yes. So David Milgate, who's the artist,
Mhm.
is absolutely going to be a part of that project. Or subsequent projects. And Jonathan Kruk, as we can see for now, yes, absolutely. More
Okay.
involvement from these characters are definitely going to be in the next phase, as well as my wife Elizabeth, who is the singer, the vocalist.
Oh, she's got a beautiful voice.
Thank you.
Yeah. So who
Yeah,
does
she's also
the
working on her.
okay.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say she's also working on a another very interesting project while we're doing this as well, which is sort of in the realm of dreams. So we're calling it dream metal type music.
Ooh, ooh, that sounds interesting too. Who does the harsh vocals?
Oh, that's Elizabeth and I.
Oh, okay. So
We
you're
both
doing
did
the harsh
together.
and she's
Yep.
doing the cleans. I mean, I know she has
No,
some lower parts.
she does harsh vocals as well.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Yep.
Wow. I mean, that shouldn't surprise me. There's a lot of vocalists that are able to have ranges like that, but I didn't because she's had such an operatic voice, I didn't realize that that's her. That wow, she's super talented.
Yes. She's very talented at doing it. She's been doing it for a long time. Ever since she was probably, I think, 19 years old.
Mm.
So she's had a lot of practice. She's actually also a metal vocal coach for people who are interested in learning
Oh,
about that kind of stuff.
geez.
And so she's had operatic training. So she's learned how to, do these sorts of things without damaging her voice.
Yeah.
And she's taught me a bit of how to do it myself.
Yeah.
Because my first foray into it was the first album, but I was very much a novice into it. But I've grown a little bit more adept at trying to do these, and the tonalities between my wife's voice and I are they're very complementary. So like I'll do a lot of things that are like kind of in the sub layer because I have a deeper voice than her, and then she'll kind of take over the higher register, and we marry those together.
That's cool. Oh my gosh. Yeah. My son wants to do metal vocals too. So you guys would just be like the perfect pair for him. Uh,
Awesome.
yeah, he keeps he loves like Chelsea Grin, loves
Oh
Death.
yeah.
He's like really trying to, and Theos, we're pretty close with Cheney, and so he is trying to imitate those voices. And I'm like, you're doing good, but you got to make sure you're doing it correctly. Like just because you can do it doesn't mean you're doing it correctly, and you're gonna destroy your voice if
Yeah.
you don't learn
And
how to do it right.
and when you're young, it's also okay that you can't do it just yet because your voice is still developing.
Right.
So we try to just let people know that are very young that they want to do this stuff. And they're like, oh yeah, I want to be like, Slipknot, Corey Taylor. I'm like, yeah, Corey Taylor's like a lot older than you too, though.
Right.
So just have some patience, but know that the what you're doing is you're also training your voice, and it requires a bit of muscle building, right? So that
Wow.
your voice knows how to handle it. So that's the biggest thing. It's really just a lot of patience. It's something that happens over time. And if it hurts, then it is doing it wrong. It should
Right.
not hurt. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, he just does like a little bit here and there, but he like practices it. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds right, but that doesn't mean it's not gonna hurt if you try to do it for a couple hours in one night or
Yeah.
night after night.
Night after night. Yeah. Doing metal shows. Yeah. That will definitely test you.
For sure. Yeah. So you did a couple covers in this too. What made you decide to
Uh,
mix in the Laid to Rest and was it Snowbound?
yes.
Snowbound covers.
Laid to Rest, Lamb of God is a huge influence of mine. One of the first metal bands I used to listen to. Um, I always appreciated that song, more so because Laid to Rest was a big part of my middle school upbringing.
Oh geez, you're young.
Yeah, I am 32.
Okay. Yeah.
So I
That's awesome. You're doing a lot already when you're super young. That's really
thank
awesome.
you. Thank you. I maybe a little bit too much for my own good.
I'm sure it feels like that sometimes, but
But no, yeah, when I was in middle school, I remember like talent shows. I remember actually seeing a couple friends of mine, they played the song while I was listening to the record at home. My brother was totally introducing that stuff to me, and I was infatuated with Lamb of God at that time. So, I mean, that was around 2004, right? Yeah. So
probably, yeah.
that was just when I was about seventh grade. Yeah. And I loved it. I just said this is the kind of music I like to listen to. I would be on forums at my young years just to kind of socialize with other musicians, and I'd be hearing that stuff in the background. I'd be playing other bands like Saliva, Skindred.
Mm.
They were like all these other things, and Godsmack and Disturbed, and that was like my childhood.
All
So
those 90s bands, yeah. Or
yeah,
early
like new
2000s, I
metal.
guess,
Yeah,
most
early
of it.
2000s,
Uh,
like new metal. Like my brother, the first metal I've ever heard was like Metallica, of course, because
hmm.
like that's like doing it right. So I was
Right.
like, I'm starting off on a good foot. I think my first song was Fuel by
Oh,
Metallica.
geez. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Give me
So
fuel, give me
fun.
fire, give me that with chances are. Yeah. Right. So I'm just like on a roll with it. And I just I wanted to pay homage to that too. I felt that it was such a cool song that
And it
inspired me at a
fits with
young
the
age.
story.
and the story, the place that it took in the story is right after a song called Sacred Order,
Mm-hmm.
which is a call to really democracy to fight against what is evil. And I always looked at the Sacred Order as the mindset of the horrors of World War II and this emergency call, and Laid to Rest was sort of the answer to that call.
Mm, okay.
And so when you go and you see it that way, it's like, okay, now we're in action. So it's
Yeah.
a very fun time to see that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
like that. Yeah,
no,
I like that connection. I didn't quite put those two together that way, but that's awesome. And then
and
right after that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, like, you know, Laid to Rest, that was my artistic intent, but there's so many different ways to interpret it, and I'm always interested in hearing those things. Snowbound, on the other hand, was like a different thing, because at the time when I heard Wages of Sin by Arch Enemy, the album, it was, I think it was just like an instrumental tune. It wasn't really like their most popular thing at all. And it's a short piece. It was just guitar, if I remember correctly. And it felt like this thing that was such a great I guess melody theme to what I felt, it was very frosty feeling because of Snowbound, right? It's in the title, but I wanted to take it to a level where I made it feel like a recluse, something where we had just exited the inferno and we were finally maybe on the other side, and there was still some wonder to be had. So going into purgatory, which is where Snowbound is leading the listener into, it felt like, in my story, like a hallelujah, like an opportunity to do a hallelujah.
Mhm.
And so I added, the narrative, and I added some lyrics to Snowbound that never existed on the original track to create that element. And it felt a little bit more expansive that way. So it was another way to also create dynamics in the album to,
Yeah,
nicely tie a
with the
bow at the
flow.
end.
Yeah, yeah, because it starts off, yeah, kind of like you're getting ready for this adventure, but it's a very soft beginning that kind of eases you into it, and then it just gets really intense. And then yeah, it ends with that one that kind of yeah brings it back down. But and it is lighter and obviously has a more hopeful feeling, but it also is really sad because then he's, remembering who he left behind. And I
Right.
thought that was really, really well done. How it like that middle part is so intense and there's so much going on.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it's just kind of like, okay, take a deep breath.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes the suite, the Circle of Dead Children suite, which is tracks 5 through 8,
Mhm.
it was all written as one piece.
Oh, I could totally see that.
And it's actually 33 minutes and 3 seconds, uh, to
Oh,
be
wow.
exact.
How did you make that? That had to have been painful. That had to have been painful in so many different ways of cutting or extending parts that maybe took some time to really wrap your head around. How was that process? I can't even wrap
uh
my head around trying to do that.
yeah, I know, because it's definitely one of those things. I wanted it to be an Easter egg.
Hmm.
And I'm hopefully trying to continue that trend moving forward. So through all the other Divine Comedy, excerpts, we'll hear 33-minute and 3 second pieces. So we'll see how that goes. But doing it really, oddly enough, it was pretty natural. And actually, for a lot of this kind of stuff, incorporating things like, for example, samples like Franklin D. Roosevelt in Sacred Order, a lot of that wasn't edited in the way that you might think. It was actually in the natural pace of the
Wow.
speech. And very much with things in the Circle of Dead Children suite, as I'm like writing, because when I write in not traditional song form. I write with expansive song form. So I'll come up with thematic ideas or leitmotifs, if you want to call them that. And they are just these sort of identities that represent maybe certain aspects of where the listener might be in the Inferno journey. So I'll
Mhm.
have these certain themes, and then I'll find my job is to find transitions
Mhm.
and create the bridges that allow one person to hear this theme, go into this, but then if I reintroduce a theme, you can consider it like a chorus, but it's not really like a chorus per se. It's a theme. So
Right.
the entire approach to making Homeric music is very much more like a film score, where if there was a visual, it would
It would
probably maybe make more sense for people to understand the process. But because there's no visual, the entire event happens in your mind. So I'm leaning a lot on intuition and vibes and feelings and just trying to, flush ideas out in certain ways. Actually, one of my inspirations for this entire venture was an old record by a band called Dream Theater, called 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. And that second CD on that album is this like 45-minute orchestral suite. And it's the only side of that CD that I would actually ever listen to. I wouldn't listen to the first half. I'd always just go to the 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, and I'd listen to the whole thing. And it was something that I loved. I was so obsessed with it. I was like, I love the idea that everything fits together, but like I could also like skip to the parts of the suite that I liked. And I wanted to do the same thing with Circle of Dead Children. So I created it as one thing, um, let it naturally pan out. And by the time it started getting close to like the 30-minute mark, I was like, now I have to start, maybe seeing how do I wrap it up. And those decisions happened a lot later. It wasn't early on. It was just like just right, 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 right.
Mhm.
And then there's like maybe moments where I can add some space. So actually in Treachery, you'll actually hear there are more moments of space and silence, like in the very beginning, for example, where you hear more of the narrative part of it come to life and the environment is ensuing around you.
Mhm.
But it creates also a build to create the reprise of Godless, and then venture off into, meeting the devil himself.
Mhm.
Very interesting part of the suite. So I actually, it's probably my favorite part of the entire suite is the entire section of Treachery.
Oh, that's awesome. That's cool that you were able to utilize those I don't want to call them tricks, but those ideas and those concepts to make that even more of a experience, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, my background is like a total cinephile from my brother who works at AMC theaters, where he would bring the family and we would watch movies for free because that was the hookup. And I was like, this is great. I was always around movies. And he still works for the company today, and he's always like been involved in that, and that was just naturally a part of my upbringing. So listening to soundtracks, watching a lot of movies, playing video games, my brother was really good at introducing me to all those things.
Right.
So big shout out to him, Sergio. And he really just opened the door for all the possibilities of those creativity. Um, I was always a little more technically minded and wanted to always explore like computers and all that kind of stuff, and audio definitely was a part of that. But I was always really artistic, and my mother and father are both artists. My mother specifically was a fashion designer, and my father was a musician. So
Okay. Wow. Just a whole family of you guys then.
yeah.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Well, I'm sure you've been asked this before, but I'm curious. Who's your favorite composer and what's your favorite soundtrack that you revisit?
Yeah, I probably think my favorite composer is Howard Shore.
Yeah.
Um I have other ones on that list as well. Hans Zimmer is, kind of a go-to for many things because he has so many. Like Lion King is a really great one, but
Mhm.
you also have James Newton Howard, John Powell. These are just composers that I've listened to over the many years. One of the more recent ones that it's actually not a recent score, but I've been revisiting it quite a bit lately is actually Dragonheart by Randy
Oh
Edelman.
my gosh, I love that movie.
You
I don't
remember that
know if
movie
with Sean
with
Connery as the
Dennis Quaid?
dragon. Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah,
gosh, it's the saddest movie ever. I love that movie, but I don't remember the
yeah.
music. I'll have to go back and I don't
Oh
know if
my
I could watch
gosh.
it again. I used to watch it a lot, but it would just make me cry every time, and so
You know,
I'll have to listen to it.
that score is something really special. And actually I've always loved that score. But I don't know, lately I've been listening to a lot of it, and I think maybe it's because I'm kind of in my musical phase of thinking about heaven and what
Mhm.
that means. And I'm referring to a lot of these other types of scores that I used to listen to a long time ago. Lion King definitely is going to be one of those inspirations, but Dragonheart or, The Lord of the Rings, those types of movies and scores are really inspirational for me.
Yeah.
For The Circle of Dead Children, it was much more like Nightmare Before Christmas, like Tim
Yeah.
Burton, Danny Elfman, like because it's very wacky and like some of those sections in the Inferno, they sound like Danny Elfman might have like played a
Totally.
part in that. So, but that was the intention. And I grew up as a Halloween kid. I mean, my mother, um, she would treat Halloween like Christmas for us, where the pumpkins were every if we carved them and we brought them to life, they would reward us with presents.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, how fun.
yeah, that was a way that we would sort of celebrate Halloween. So I always look forward to it. And I was like, oh yeah, everybody does this. But I found out that no, not everybody
No.
does that at all.
No, that's so cool though. I carve pumpkins like a madman every year. I think I did over 10 this year. But that's such a cool twist to it. I love that.
Yeah. So let's start a trend on making pumpkins give people presents.
Yes. Yes, that's such a cool idea. Huh,
Yep.
cool. What's your favorite Halloween movie? I know we're kind of past the Halloween time, but or score. How about that? Let's go with the favorite Halloween score. Because there's a
Uh,
lot of really good ones.
oh man. Well, I mean, I guess, the obvious one is definitely stuff like Nightmare Before Christmas, but Halloween score. I'm trying to think what I would actually really like to use as a Halloween score. I mean, you have also the classics, Friday the 13th, Michael Myers from Halloween itself. Um, but I think honestly, things like Beetlejuice is really great too. Um, those and actually, if you take a listen to the new Beetlejuice score, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
But I think yeah, like Danny Elfman, I'd probably say is I can't really say I can name one as my favorite in totality, but I'd probably say Danny Elfman is the king when it comes to
yeah.
Halloween.
Oh, for sure.
And I would always refer to Danny Elfman for any of that inspiration.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, there's a ton of different movies out there. The thing about some of these scores when it comes to horror is that they're not as much thematic scores, but you actually know what's a really good one is Sinister. Um,
Mm.
if you remember, it's actually a very synthesizer heavy. It's composed by a composer named Christopher Young, and his approach is really, really disturbing because he uses sound design in a manner like an old composer by the name of John Cage, where it's very atonal and it feels like it's sonic palettes more than they are notes. Um, I really like that approach. Sinister is a very good one. There's another really great composer. His name is Mark Corvin, who made the score for a movie called The Vitch. or The Witch with
Oh,
the two
I just
V's.
watched
I don't
that
know if
this
you've
year
seen
for the
the
first time.
A24 movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the A24 movie. That score is
Oh,
actually really scary.
yeah,
Yeah. And what he there's
yeah.
this
Hmm.
if you want to take a listen to it, there's a very specific one called A Witch Steals Sam. And it's got this sort of like horror with choir. So you hear like "Ah," right, but you're also hearing this sort of clapping sound. And it just sounds like two wood blocks, like you're just slapping wood blocks together. But inside the movie, the scene represents this witch who's about to eat a baby,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one of the most disturbing parts of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I just remember that when I was actually writing the book for the Circle of Dead Children, I was listening to that score.
Oh, interesting.
And what it did was it set shivers, kind of down my spine a little bit. I wanted to be just creeped out enough. And likewise, I would also listen to things like Sinister, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but the more thematic stuff like Danny Elfman is more memorable, I think, in the
Yeah,
case of things for the general public because it's
for
very
sure.
thematic. You can,
Mm-hmm.
boys and girls of every age, like you can remember those lyrics and
Mm-hmm.
melodies for the rest of your life. You can't really do the same with Sinister or Mark Corvin stuff. Um, but yeah, those are some ideas.
Cool. That's interesting. When you said A24, I don't know why my brain went to apartment 7A, which is not even the same thing. A24 is a whole company. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Because that one was a really, I don't know if you've seen that, but that one was a very uh theatrical movie that had some very interesting musical parts in it too. So that's where my brain went. And then I was like,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
still talking about The Witch.
Yeah. And I mean, like video games are a big part of that too. Like if you listen to the soundtracks of like Silent Hill or Resident Evil,
Mhm,
they are also in some ways very sound design based. And really horror is about creating an ambiance
mhm.
and not necessarily about the theme itself. Although if you do it right, you can create a theme through sound design. And so
Yeah,
so so when people hear a certain, tone, they know what it means, right? And that
right.
that creates a print in your mind. So it's very, very such an interesting part of the industry to sort of listen for and it comes to that. And I appreciate it a lot. And like I said, I used it in my inspiration for writing the book too.
That's so cool. That's cool. So did you write the book?
I did. Yes.
Jeez, my goodness, you have to be going just a million miles an hour. Are you going to create a video game as well for it? Because at this
you
point,
know, I think in the future, it lends itself to it. I
yeah,
think if there's an opportunity to be able to make it happen, I definitely would take it.
yeah, yeah. Why not? You have to be a D&D player if you're a
I
story
am.
creator. Okay. I was gonna say that would be a disservice to D&D if you weren't creating stories out there for
Well,
people to be able to actually play.
fun fact, if you go to homeric.org, you'll find that there's a page called the glossary, and that was specifically made for Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, cool. Ooh, I'll have to take a look. I haven't been able to play for the last probably like 6 months, but
Yeah.
I'll have to take a look. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's just another resource because really what I'm creating here is a world.
Yeah.
And I was like, actually one of my very own fans requested something like this. And he was saying, "Hey, I want to use your soundtrack for my D&D campaign." I was like, "You know what? Let me just give you more resources for that too because I think this stuff can help you with your inspiration." And
Hmm.
so I hope that other people do the same. And if you actually take a look at the art book, which is sort of like a behind the scenes look into all the makings of the Circle of Dead Children, on the back of the book, there's also a feature for the glossary in print format, and it's all nice and looks like one of those D&D editions that you'd find in a Dungeon Master's book.
Yeah, that's cool. Is that something that you had thought about doing as well as creating like an actual campaign? I mean, that's kind of what it is, but or what it could be, I guess. it depends. You'd have to have other people helping Dante, I guess. And
Well, my cousin's a very talented D&D dungeon master, and I've definitely played with the idea of making something a little more official for that. Um, I think a couple things need to happen before I can devote time to that, but it is in the back of my mind. And that's one of the reasons why I was like, let me put out this glossary because I think that's the first step in that direction. Because I love tabletop games, I do.
Mhm.
And I think it's a really great way to socialize with friends without having to just play a video game. It engages, and I think Homeric probably engages a little more to the tabletop player because by nature of just listening to the album or the audiobook itself, it entices your imagination. The movie happens in your mind.
Yes.
So if
Ab-
we're going that route, I'd love to also make a more formal approach to that. So we'll see. But that's a really entertaining and exciting idea.
yes. Do you have a Twitch channel?
I do, but it's not really being actively used. I
Okay.
actually used Twitch during the pandemic, when I had to teach online lessons
Mhm.
for the schools that I was
Oh,
at.
smart.
And because everything kind of switched on us on a dime, and we
Yeah.
were like, okay, we're gonna have to, teach online. And at the time, uh, the application Zoom wasn't really capable of doing what we needed as audio engineers and professors of audio technology. It really wasn't working. There was limited features, and actually, that's one of the reasons why Zoom actually ended up becoming a thing with, pro audio features for that very purpose. So we were using Twitch and
Yeah.
just streaming through, software like OBS to make it online, and our students would just log into Twitch and type in the chat, and then sometimes we'd get a random person in and they'd just be hanging out, and we're like, I don't know who this person is, but welcome to my class. You haven't paid for it, but you're here. Thanks for coming.
Hey,
It was such a weird part of the time of it, but Twitch is very interesting. My other cousin actually, she goes by the name of Miss Lala. She's actually a VTuber on Twitch, and so she uses this sort of avatar thing, but she's more in that world than I am. But it's definitely interesting to think about too.
yeah, the reason I asked is Unleash the Archers did a campaign that they had like a certain amount of fans that bought the last, not the last album, the one before. They just did like a random drawing, and those people that were selected were able to do the campaign that Brittany created. And so, and I
Wow.
don't know if they're still doing it or not, but they did that for a while. And so I thought that was a really cool. I mean, you get to connect with fans and kind of get a little bit more out there because people need to hear this. This is absolutely genius. It's an
Thank
incredible
you.
experience. It's intense in all the best ways. I've listened to it a few times now, and I started looking at the lyrics while I was listening to it because there's some of the lower register like choir parts that I didn't know that they were saying things. And so, and those things are, important things to hear to get the full spectrum. And so, so yeah, there's so many different ways to be able to hear it and listen to it, and you get so many different things out of it each time, whether it's just the background adventure that's kind of taking place or the full immersive experience. It's really cool.
Well, thanks for saying that. You know, for those people who don't know, if you buy the album through metalmastermindshop.com, you actually get access to the orchestral and instrumental tracks.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
if especially if you're like a D&D campaigner and you want to have some background music, but you don't want all the metal growls and stuff all on top of it, that's a really cool version of the entire suite. So there's another way to experience the album, and the orchestral is really its own monster. I
Yeah.
have I remixed it to be, orchestrally more viable. It's not like just, oh, mute the vocals and then just print it. I actually went ahead and remixed it to make it a little more viable to for the experience. And we mastered it completely differently and everything. So it's a
Wow.
whole nother level.
Jeez. Oh my gosh. The amount of passion and effort and work that went into this just sounds extreme in the best way. And I
Thank
hope
you.
that, yes, and I hope that you get the reach that you deserve with it. Because it's, yeah, it's incredible. And you can tell that you are very, very passionate about it. It
Well,
shows
thank
not
you.
only with you talking about it, but just in listening to it.
Wow. Well, I do really appreciate that. And I will say this. The journey through Homeric, I mean, 10 years is a long time, but it was also a very arduous time for me. I was, basically from my early 20s to my early 30s making this record, and there's a lot of growth for a person in that amount of
Yes.
time.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Um, yeah, I mean, like the first record of Homeric was an entire band. That band no longer exists in this
Mhm,
project, and that was really hard. I actually went and redid any of the content from any of those members that would have originally had been a part of.
mhm,
It was a way for me to sort of secure myself and to challenge myself. And at the time when that transition was happening, I had met one of my heroes. It was Michael Romeo, who really kind of gave me some advice about my production. And I took an entire year to reorchestrate things.
wow.
But I kept doing it because it didn't feel like a hobby to me. It felt like a sacred duty more than anything else.
Mhm,
Um, I had always this feeling that I couldn't let go of a project like this because it was me through and through. So letting go of that meant giving up on myself. So
yeah.
I was always going to do it anyway, whether it was successful or not. And that I think is really important to understand because the music industry can feel very um, challenging in its authenticity sometimes.
Mhm,
And I think when we are talking about art, it's important to recognize where art really comes from. And if there's actually a really great conversation between Anderson Cooper and Rick Rubin, where Rick Rubin mentions that art, is for the artist, it's not for its audience.
mhm,
And if you are making something for the audience, it becomes not art, but commerce.
yeah. And you
And
can tell a difference as a listener, I feel like.
yeah, and he puts it in a really good perspective that way. And I agree with it wholeheartedly. So this really was a labor of love. It was a labor of art. And I think one of the defining factors of that is that this is an independent project. It's not backed by any label except my own, and I call all the shots, which
Mhm,
means that even as an unknown artist in the very beginning, it gave me the liberty to experiment, to try things that I was, unable to do. It was a challenge because there's no money behind it. Everything has to
right.
come from me, which
Yeah.
means I have to work a job. I have to do all
Right.
these things. And, when band members break up like that, and you're living with them, you have to move.
Oh,
So
geez.
it was a
Oh,
process, right? So I had a lot of growing to do, and life happens and that's okay. But if you look at it as, like I mentioned, a sacred duty, it doesn't ever leave. It just means it takes a little longer. And at the end of the day, if what you're creating is what you believe to be the greatest thing that you can create, then that's all that really matters. And that there's value in of itself because of that.
yes.
So that's what I would always say to people, especially my students who I currently teach in all these universities. It's a lot of that. It's to expect that your journey may probably take 10 years. And that's okay because at the end of the day, if it's yours, it's rightfully yours and you can be proud of it.
I love that. I think that's so important. That's a really important message.
Thanks.
Yes. You're welcome. Thank you for sharing it with me.
You're welcome, Nika. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. I've really appreciated this talk and appreciated diving into your brain. I look forward to what to the purgatory and to the heaven and to the audiobook. Definitely. I'm a huge reader. If you saw the room I'm in, it's just full of
Awesome.
bookshelf. I have so many books. It's a little bit chaotic and little bit insane. I don't know if you can say that when it comes to books, but I have an insane amount.
Well,
But
no, I'm glad to hear it. And for anybody who's interested, the book, we sell it in bundles. You can buy the entire package where there's the novel, the art book, the CD, and we're actually also selling with sensory candles so
oh,
that you can have an entire experience listening to the music, opening up, with a scent that helps you to transform your experience.
plus scent holds memories so that whatever the scent is,
Yep.
the next time they smell that smell, they're gonna remember the
Right.
reason behind it. I love that. So
And
smart.
if I may recommend, if you get the Underworld bundle or any of the candles that go along with it, I would start off with the Godless candle. And then as you approach the Inferno, you turn on the River of Fire candle. And then towards the end, you light the Godless candle once more.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm definitely going to do that because that sounds like a really see. There's the other experience that you get to have with the same album.
Yep.
It's amazing.
And
Awesome.
by the way, have you had a chance to listen to it in Dolby Atmos?
I have not. I don't even know. You know what? I have some skull candies somewhere that are like the ones that go over your ears. That would probably give me that fuller experience because I can only imagine the hidden sounds that are lurking that are going to be that much more present in a case like that. So I'm gonna do both of those things at the same time, and I'm
Yep,
super
it's
excited
another it's
about
another layer to the experience, and it was designed for Atmos. So if you have any access to Atmos capable, you could even do it on like sound bars, or you can
it.
do it
Okay,
on anything that says Dolby Atmos on it.
okay,
You can activate that, and I think in streaming, Apple Music or Tidal use Atmos.
okay.
And those are the preferred platforms to listen to it on for those reasons. But it is, accessible in stereo. If that's all you have, that's totally fine.
Right.
In the future, I do hope to sell this on Blu-ray so that people can put
Oh,
it in their Blu-ray players,
yeah,
activate Atmos at home if they have like a home theater or anything like that as well.
that's amazing. Layers upon layers upon layers.
Yeah, a lot of circles of hell, so I got to
Yeah,
match it.
right. Right. Good luck getting out of it.
Yeah, I know. Thank you. I'll try.
Thank you
Well,
so much for taking so much time with me, Ken. I look
you got
forward
it.
to, I'm sure I'll chat with you in the future about what you got going on, and I definitely look forward to it.
Thank you so much. I will see you later, Nika.
Sounds good.
Bye
Bye.
bye.